Well, it's the Combine. It's been happening for a long time, but has grown in stature and relevance. And Albert Breer is now joining us live. We got news breaking as we speak. Let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. A little Brock Purdy news percolating. What say you? What's happening there, Albert?
Well, I think they're going to try to get something done. And really the question, I think, is the timeline. There's no doubt, and there hasn't been any doubt, that they want to go forward with Brock Purdy as their quarterback. But the market has materially changed, really over the last few years. Now you got 9 quarterbacks making over $50 million per year. The Niners obviously have a lot of mouths to feed with their roster being what it is. And, guys like Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk at the top of the market at their positions. So how does all this come together? And I think the other thing you got to look at here, Colin, is the team's history and the way the team has handled these things over the last few years. And I thought back to, the Jimmy Garoppolo negotiation, which was done at the end of January, believe it or not. They got that one done almost immediately after, the first season the two sides had together, the first half season they had together. And since then, the negotiations they've had with their own players have been a lot more difficult. Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa, Brandon Ayuk, all those went all the way through training camp. And so, that, I think, is the biggest question. I have confidence they'll get something done with Brock Purdy. I think the question is on what the timing looks like. And is this something that gets tied up in the spring, or are we talking about this when we get deep into training camp? I think that's the part that's uncertain about it.
Okay, I said the Sam Darnold story confused me. I think it could be Sam Darnold's agent putting it out there to create a market that the Niners or the Vikings are still kind of interested in negotiating. And I'm like, okay, then why'd you give away picks for J.J. McCarthy? Is it an injury thing? It feels like somebody's trying to elevate the Sam Darnold market because now Aaron Rodgers is out there. What do you make of the stories the Vikings are considering options to do the Sam Darnold contract and it not be a franchise tag?
I think that the number, the lump sum number for the franchise tag being over $40 million a year complicates it. Most teams don't want to pay that all at once. Obviously it's not the ideal scenario for Sam either, although I do think he really enjoyed playing in Minnesota and got a lot out of playing for Kevin O'Connell. So, I think the most likely scenario in this case remains Sam goes to the market and then they see what Sam's market is and they make a decision there accordingly. I think they'd like to have Sam back.
Okay.
And I think they'd like to, but I think there's a limit to how far they're willing to go with Sam. So
why not just go with J.J. McCarthy? Are there reservations about J.J. McCarthy?
Well, he's coming off the 2 knee surgeries, and the last one was just a cleanup. So I think that's part of the equation here. I think coming back, like, your question is going to be, is he going to be in a position to hit the ground running when you get to OTAs? And is he going to be in a position where you're going to be able to say to your team, we're giving you the best chance to win at the most important position on the field? And they have confidence in JJ. And JJ did a lot of things right. JJ pushed Sam last year, in a way they didn't expect. It was a real, discussion point there in August before JJ got hurt. Is there a scenario where JJ plays significant snaps? Now, obviously, the injury happens, and that changes a lot of things. I think what you'd be looking at now is, where is JJ's weight at? Where does he, how does he look physically coming off the injury? Because these things can take a toll on you. And so I think those are the sorts of things that the Vikings are watching right now when it comes to determining the management of their quarterback position. And I think they're at least going to backstop themselves.
Okay.
Now, does that mean Sam Darnold at $25 or $30 million a year? It could. Does that mean Daniel Jones at a lower number? It could. I don't think it's just going to be JJ and some run-of-the-mill backup, but I do think they've got confidence that JJ can be a really good quarterback for them in 2025.
Okay, let's get to the Stafford thing. My take is the Raiders news that Tom Brady called Matt Stafford's interesting, and here's why. Pete Carroll, say it out loud. Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Max Crosby, a left tackle that's redeemable. Even their center they hit on last year from Oregon. I've got Brock Bowers, who is a transcendent weapon. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, it's indoors. they'd give him more years and more money than the Rams would. That one felt to me like I could see. I mean, think about this. And I know this is, I don't want to be an accountant. 13.5% taxes, Rams will give you 2 years. No state taxes, Raiders give you 4. That could be a $60, $70 million swing, Albert. Like, I would listen to that if I was Matt Stafford. Would you?
I think it makes some sense for the Raiders in that I think so much of what Tom Brady is doing and trying to establish there is to add credibility to the organization. Pete Carroll obviously is a very credible head coaching hire. John Spytek is well respected across the NFL coming in as his GM. And I think a big part of this for Tom in working with Mark Davis is sort of reimagining who the Raiders are and changing the way that they're perceived across the landscape of all of sports.
Yeah.
And so part of that is bringing in the big money guys, having his own partner, Tom Wagner, part of the equation, Egan Durbin, who's, the CEO of Silver Lake Capital. Like, you've got resources, which is part of how you pay, say, $6 million a year to go and get Chip Kelly. And adding Matthew Stafford at quarterback, I think, would make some sense from that standpoint in that you're going to be able to get competitive quicker. The bigger question, I think, if you're weighing the idea of bringing in a Stafford versus maybe going and making a run at Sam Darnold, is, okay, like, where does this leave us in 2026? Where does this leave us in 2027? And if part of the issue for Stafford with the Rams is, well, we don't know where you're going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, ostensibly you probably have the same problem if you were the Raiders. So I love the idea of it. I do think it'll allow you to attract free agents, and they've got a lot of resources there now to attract free agents. And I think it can be a destination if you set it up the right way and you have a quarterback to attract people in. I think the one question, if you are going to go and acquire Matthew Stafford, if you're the Raiders, has to be, what does this look like 2 or 3 years from now? And are we close enough where we want to go and take a win now sort of swing and give up assets to do it?
Okay, so this is interesting, a little wonky, but the NFLPA report card came out where the players tell you what they think of their organization. Yep. I saw the Steelers on the list of places players were not happy. And that was the one that jumped out to me. I always thought Tomlin was a pro-player organization. That one jumped out to me. Any surprises for you on the NFLPA report card about teams, players, and how they feel about the franchise?
Well, I think one thing that's definitely notable is it's gotten better. Like, it seems like what they're doing is working. They showed us a whole bunch of different statistics and metrics that show that there are far fewer failing grades for teams that players are handing out. And I think a big part of that is that a lot of these guys were embarrassed by some of the stuff that was out there on their teams. And so I do think to some degree some of that stuff's been fixed. It's interesting because I think the Pittsburgh thing relates back to one thing that I think has got to be a factor in all of these situations, and that's your team facility. I believe the Chargers jumped from 30th to 5th, Colin. And
wow.
I know the Spanoses have done a lot of good things over the last year, and Jim Harbaugh makes a difference, but how much of that's just the building, the facility? And Miami and Minnesota are 1 and 2 with 2 of the newest facilities in the league. I think part of Pittsburgh's problem is they're in an older facility that's attached to the Pitt facility, the University of Pittsburgh football facility.
Yeah.
You share a bunch of stuff with the University of Pittsburgh. It's just not this like megaplex that you have in Minnesota, or you have in Dallas, or you have in Miami, or you have now at the Chargers. I think so much of that survey, a lot of it is based on what your physical building looks like.
Okay.
And Pittsburgh's isn't great. Pittsburgh scored high in some other areas. So I think that's one thing that definitely sticks out every year is that is tied to the facility. The other thing that I think is interesting is most players are pretty happy with their head coaches. I think someone got a B plus. I was reading one of the blurbs. Someone got a B plus and they were ranked 24th among head coaches. So, I mean, if you're giving your coach a B plus and he's 24th of 32, and then you got all these players giving their owners C's and D's and F's, it tells you that I think most of the head coaches are connecting with their players. So that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
New England being at the bottom of the list was sort of interesting, I think, as well. when you sort of look at this and say, okay, like how much does this have to do with winning and losing? And when you lose the luster of being what they were for 20 years, to see them 31st overall, and then to see the owner in the bottom five of the three categories that players were ranking them in, I think that was pretty eye-opening as well.
Shedeur Sanders is dropping in the draft. I said this yesterday. My favorite quality of his, draft status is that he had a terrible run game, the worst in Power 5 for 2 years, and the worst offensive line for 2 years in college football. So he's had to initiate offense. He'll probably go to a team without a great offensive line. There's a reason why so many quarterbacks in the NFL go to Wyoming, Texas Tech, Miami of Ohio, Cal, is that it's a real college experience. It's a real pro experience that you're running for your life with no run support. I think that makes Shedeur more attractive. Why is he falling in the draft? Because it does feel like there's a gradual regression for him.
Well, first of all, I would agree with you on that. Like, I think if you're at Ohio State or Alabama, like how often are you going past your out of your first progression, right? Like how often are you going to number 2? How often are you going to number 3? How often do you have to move in the pocket to make things work, to cover up an issue your offensive line might have? I think all that stuff is 100% valid. And we've seen that with some of the quarterbacks who've come out of the powerhouse schools where they've struggled because they haven't had to find those answers that deep into an individual play, or they haven't had to be as creative in making things happen. I think the issue with Shedeur, and this is going to be a difficult thing for him to address over the next 6 or 7 months, or 6 or 7 weeks, is are you special in any one area? Do you have a superpower trait? Or are you an average athlete with an average arm in an NFL context? And I think that that's the way a lot of teams look at him. He's not a great athlete. He doesn't have a big arm. So, like, where is the superpower that's going to make you want to take him in the top 5? And I think he attached that then to what the teams in the AFC are looking up at. And that's sort of this Mount Olympus of quarterbacks, right? So if you're Tennessee picking first or Cleveland picking second, I'll borrow a term that Daniel Jeremiah used with me a few days ago. It's almost like you have to chase ceiling, because it's not can this guy be a good player? It's can this guy be good enough to compete with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow in the AFC. And, oh, by the way, when you get by those guys, you've still got more guys with a lot of upside in C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix and Drake May. It's a gauntlet, So, like, if you draft Shedeur Sanders in the top 5 or top 10 picks, could he get up and running pretty fast? I think he probably could.
Yeah.
5 years from now, are you going to be comfortable giving him $55, $60, $65 million a year? I think that's the question.
Yeah. See, I've always argued that what you don't want to be in the NFL is at chaos at quarterback. I think Shedeur Sanders is a little bit like Jared Goff. If he has a good coach, he stabilizes you, that he completes passes, he moves the chains, he's not going to get in trouble, he is very accurate, he stabilizes a tire fire of an organization. And there's about 7 of those a year in the league. He's not going to change the ascension, but you won't have to worry about quarterback for 5 years. Like, he's a grown-up that completes passes, and that's what Jared Goff. He's out of the news, moves the chains. I don't like him in a cold weather. I don't like him against a great player, but there is something to be said. Like, the Raiders need stabilization. The Browns need, the Bears need it. Sometimes in this league, it's not what you can do, it's what you won't do, which is get us in trouble.
Right, and that, again, though, like, it's just, are you going to be able to level up and compete on the highest level with him? And I agree, like, that he could come in and stabilize that position for a team. Like, is he going to get to a second contract? Or are you going to be left in year 3 or year 4 wanting for more and saying to yourself, like, is this it? Is this all we're going to get? It's sort of the Mac Jones thing, right? Mac Jones was great as a rookie. They were able to get him out there and get him up and running and playing at a pretty high level pretty fast. And then it was sort of like that was it with him, And so that's the biggest question with Shedeur. And that's why I think some teams view Shedeur as closer to Jackson Dart than maybe he is to Cam Ward. I think with Cam Ward, that's the chase the ceiling guy. Like, that's the guy where it's not consistent enough, but it's gotten a little bit more consistent over the last couple of years. and you see the flashes of greatness with him, and maybe you look at him and you say, okay, like I can envision where he's going to get there, and he's going to be able to help us chase guys like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, versus he's always going to be like, we're always going to be the 6 or 7 team. We're always going to be not quite good enough. I think that's the concern with Shedeur.
Albert Breer at some swanky hotel in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. Hopefully Monday Morning Quarterback's picking up the bill on that. Looks very nice. Nice crown molding there. Very expensive looking.
It's very nice in here. Yeah, absolutely. I wish my earpiece was working the way a lot of the stuff here in the hotel is.
Good seeing you, my man. Albert Breer.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.